Hey, what's up, podcast? It's Jeff. Just want to jump in here. This is a special bonus episode of Teach Better Talk. This is actually going to be the audio recording from a Facebook Live that our team is doing every single day, Monday through Friday, at 8 a.m. Eastern Time in our Facebook private group. You can get in that group at teachbettergroup.com or go on to Facebook and just search Teach Better Team. You'll see our page and then you'll see the group. Get in there. So here we go, a special bonus episode of Teach Better Talk pulled from one of our Facebook Live videos in our private group at teachbettergroup.com. Hope you enjoy. This week we celebrate awesomeness that is teachers, are teachers, whatever. So super excited to be here. I think this is the first time we've done our drop-in with 3 people, so that's exciting. So I've got the amazing duo of Shay and Pav from the Great White North up in Toronto, Canada, which I love. I say that jokingly with nothing but love. And from the amazing Staff Room podcast, good friends of ours, good friends of the Teach Better Talk podcast, with some fun stuff in the works, I think, in the future. But super excited to have both of you here. How are you feeling this morning?
Great. Good morning, Jeff. It's great to be here with you today.
Good morning.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Very excited. Very excited.
I see how the roles on the duo go. She always gets to speak first. That's good.
It's tougher now because there's no body language or cues, so there's
That's
a
right.
delay. So
you're right.
We have a little side message.
You
So
go first.
Have you go first.
We're gonna get into that and the fact that like you guys are typically together all the time. But I want to say good morning to Kelly. Kelly's watching. Good morning to Brienne. Brienne says good morning. Happy Teacher Appreciation Week. Teach Better family. Good morning, Brienne. Always awesome to see you, and we appreciate you. So I'm gonna let some people get in here as they're coming in and saying hi. Good morning, Holly. Holly Stewart says hello, or says good morning. Sorry, I should quote her properly. So good morning to you. So you guys are typically both when you're teaching, you're co-teachers, and when you do your podcast, you're in the same room on the same mic, right? Usually, like it's right there. And now you're still teaching, obviously, right? And you're still running the podcast, but very different. So I don't know who wants to jump first. We'll let Pav go first. How has that changed? Let's talk from the teaching standpoint, from the co-teaching standpoint. Like, how has that changed for the two of you, and how are you dealing with the virtual thing now that you're not in there together? You're not, like you said, you don't have the body language. You're not right there in the same room. How are you handling? Has it been a pretty smooth transition? I mean, you guys have really great chemistry. I assume you guys are very, very good in the classrooms together, like, transitioning and playing off each other and stuff like that. So has that made the shift easy because you guys just work really well together? Has it been difficult because, Che has trouble with anything technology, or like, how is it working? How are you transitioning with it?
I'm really glad that transmits to everybody that I'm the. No, there have been some moments that are a little bit tough. We team teach, but doing the podcast together as well, we play off of each other's energy quite a bit. And like our students are shared. So I teach his students, he teaches my students. And now that we have our own separate Google Classrooms, that is a little bit tough. Yeah. So, I don't get to interact with his class as much as my own, and him the other way around as well. So those relationships with the students are, they're sort of missing that other half of their daily energy, right? Like they get me for the math, and although they get different things from both of us, that little bit of balance, I guess, for the students isn't there right now either. So with my students, they're not getting, that high energy sort of go-getter, fire to the day. And then for me, they're not getting that little, okay, she's here to bring us down a little bit. So it's just high energy all the time for Jason.
Sounds about right. So Melissa, good morning, Melissa. She says morning from Lansing. Alex, whoa, 3 times the awesome. Good morning. What's up, Alex? Always awesome to see you. Dave Schmitto says 3 rock stars here. Love this. And Becky, good morning, Becky. Becky says good morning. Oh, sport 3-way screen. Nice. Becky's like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. That's awesome. Becky's been in our drop-ins. Like, she's been running this thing for a while. So okay, now we got a few more people on. we got in there. Can you give us a quick intro, introduce yourself, and let anyone who's watched that hasn't met you before, maybe doesn't listen to the podcast, can you tell us just a little bit about yourselves?
Go ahead, Shay.
Go ahead, Shay. We'll let you speak.
Really? The hurricane's just waiting here to erupt.
Just a little bit.
Well, we're Jay and Pav. We're two middle school teachers out of Toronto. We've both have lots of experience. I have a lot more experience because, I've been teaching 20 years and I got a few gray hairs in here. And then we've also got our podcast, which is mostly just an extension of our teaching. It became just a means of self-reflection. And by self-reflecting, it was always about making us better in the classroom. It's exploded a little bit from there. So we have a great time podcasting, and we've expanded, and we've networked, and we've connected, and we've learned even more from other people as podcasters, but always bringing us back to being better in the classroom. And then obviously from the podcast, we've expanded to our live drive radio show, which is exceptionally fun. Like this, it's the live experience, which there's an adrenaline. Podcasting, you know what? I like podcasting, but I'm not nervous. Because when Pav makes a mistake, I just stop the record button. I see that eye roll. But it's just been really fun. So it's been exciting, and ultimately everything's made us a better teacher, more in tune with our practice. And even at 20 years experience, where I might not be the tech guy, but I'm the gym guy, I've always felt very comfortable and confident as a teacher, but it's refined so many of my skills. It's brought me a real understanding of what I was doing. Sort of, I could turn it into a pedagogy of really appreciating what I was doing for my kids. So the podcasting is it's been so great in rediscovering my voice, so good at just rediscovering my practice and fine tuning my practice. And I would never stop it, because if the impacts are making me better in the classroom, then I'm sold.
Yeah. I love it. I love the reason behind the start of the podcast and what you guys do with it and stuff. So good morning to a few people jumping in. Jeez, I'm slowing down. Good morning to Lindsay. Lindsay says good morning. Sarah, I see you there watching. Good morning to you. Andrea says good morning. Megan says good morning. Mary, good morning. I see Joe watching. Awesome to see people jumping in. They must have known you guys were coming. That's what it was.
It's family and friends. It's family and friends.
I love it. So I want to talk about the podcast that interests me, because you guys go from recording in one room to now virtual. So how are you doing that? What are you using to connect for the podcast now?
The podcast, like you're right, like the energy is always about being in the same space, but also about teaching 5 minutes, doing the podcast 5 minutes after you finish teaching. We would teach, and Friday night we said, and rather than just, whine about everything that went wrong, let's record everything that went wrong all week. So that the energy is everything I find is really forced. And sometimes really intentional, and sometimes that works out well. But the adrenaline and sort of just going off the cuff and talking and reflecting on something that happened 5 minutes ago changes a little bit, because you think a little bit more on your topics, etc. But we've also sort of changed our dynamics, because we have the podcast, which is great, but we're also doing the Drive live radio show in the morning. And so the live drive is very fun. It's very casual. It's very music based, but we get to still have educational banter. But what's happening is teachers are sort of interacting with our talk, and they're giving us, this was a really neat takeaway. I heard you guys talk about this. I heard you talk about that. And so then we decide to podcast it 5 minutes later. So Pav still has her notes. Pav always has her notes. She's got us ready for a podcast, but we find we're still managing to keep sort of that authentic energy and something that resonated right here in the moment. But I think that's probably been the biggest challenge, is not having a week's of experience and a week's worth of things going right or going wrong to know exactly what to talk about this Friday.
Right. Yeah. We have to take our inspiration from different places now, which is, everybody's doing the same, right? Everybody's kind of flying off the seat of their pants and just kind of going with the flow. So that's been a big change for us. It's a different sort of mentality when it comes to recording the podcast. So not that our energy has changed very much, but our topics definitely have. Like, we've become, obviously we try and relate as much as we can to what people are experiencing in the moment and what we are experiencing in the moment. So we feed off of a lot of what other people are talking about. And we're blessed because we have so many different mediums or different platforms that we can refer back to, and people are connecting with us in so many different ways and just telling us what their experiences have been like. So that's been really great.
Gotcha. And then, so I'm interested in the technical side too. How are you connecting and recording your podcast now that you're not in the same room? Are you connecting on what app or anything are you using to record?
We've got a whole bunch of fancy gear. So we used to have, just our one snowball mic when we started.
Mm-hmm. Which I see Pav stole, so she gets to take that.
Well, we have two. We have
two. Okay, that's good.
But because we were so tech savvy in the beginning, we weren't able to connect both of the mics to one source. So we were only using one at a time at the time. But then, we amped ourselves up. We learned about, really the proper ways to do this, and we bought ourselves a soundboard. And so now we and better mics as well. So not that anything's wrong with the Snowball. It's a great mic, but we went a little bit higher tech and, did the whole, what's a pop filter?
What's Zencastr?
Yeah, what's Zencastr? So that's really helped us out a lot, actually.
Gotcha. So I like it. Joe says, good morning. Dave says, Pav, thanks for helping keep Che so grounded. You two are awesome. Stacy says, good morning. Morning, Stacy. Becky says, I'm finding Fridays are harder in several ways now. I think, Fridays are, I think one way that Fridays are definitely harder is that you're typically on Friday, you're supposed to kind of turn off, shut down for the weekend.
Right.
It's a little harder to do with virtual because you're trying to be supportive. You're trying to be, I think in general, just the shutting down at the end of the day has been harder. I'm getting that theme from pretty much every teacher I speak with.
Yes. And
the fact that because you want to be there because it's different for your students, it's different for your families. You don't know what their work schedules are like at home and stuff. So you kind of always want to be on. And that's a really a struggle and a danger for the mental health of the teacher of, I want to be there. I always want to be available, but I also we need to relax. You need to be with your family and your time and stuff like that too. And that's difficult. How are you to handle on that? Are you turning off at the end of the day? Do you feel like you're on all the time, always? Have you found that, or are you still struggling with that? Where are you at?
Definitely in the beginning, it was on all the time. And, and not only for yourself, but, you're receiving calls from your colleagues, asking for help on setting something up, or, your students are obviously, they have no concept of on or off, right? They're just sending messages whenever, and they still are. So I do try and get back to students and even teachers as often as possible. But now that things have sort of settled down, I do take a little bit of off time. I'm turning off because those messages are going to keep coming. The contact is still going to keep coming regardless.
Yeah.
So you just have to be okay with it yourself. And I think that took for me the most amount of time, is just telling myself it's okay to turn off for a couple of hours and then get back into it, because everything is still going to be there waiting for me. So it has been a challenge. It has definitely been a challenge because you don't want to let anyone down. Right. So, that's something I'm still working on, but getting there.
It's that giving yourself some grace, right? And permission to turn off for a little bit and stuff.
Exactly.
So are you in the same spot, or you feel like, where are you at in that process?
Well, I love teaching virtual GMA. You know what? It's been it's been a wave, and it's a lot about coordinating with your students, but then it becomes a lot about coordinating with your teaching team. And so our flow was really trying to establish, and we had a couple of these conversations, like our first Zoom meeting, we spent 45 minutes with everyone thinking they needed to come on and say hi. I don't need 45 minutes of hellos. I got it. You can keep your screen mute and just give a little wave. But, that was sort of the learning curve we were at. And there's nothing wrong with hellos in the morning, but when you're talking about trying to facilitate classrooms and meetings, you can't in the informal setting, hellos are done pretty naturally and easily. But in the Google Meet setting, don't necessarily have 45 minutes to do this. So we have to sort of get through that flow. And as a staff, it was about being on the same page. So the question was, is this crisis learning? Is this e-learning? Are we duplicating school at home? And it wasn't that anyone had a real passionate stance in any position, but we were floating all over the place as a group of teachers and as a division. So we found sort of the best growth has really been being on the same page and connected with our division. And so we went through that sort of moment of, we need to have an activity in a class and a lesson for them every day, which of course seems reasonable, but then you start to realize that, as Paz talked about, it's endless notes, it's people that's not connected. And we're in the type of community where kids are still waiting on delivery of devices. Kids have issues where they worry about phones, etc., having access to stuff. Like even on an anecdotal story, I used to be able to connect with about 25 of my parents via a text message. And then it went down to 18 and then it went down to 12. I'm sitting at about 9 parents I can still directly contact with. And so that sort of lent us to realize we're in crisis learning. Let's slow it down as a division. As teachers, let's coordinate a little bit more. So, you know what? I'll teach an English class. Believe it or not, Jim Guy can do an English class on a Monday. Pav, why don't you do a math for the middle school on Tuesday? Why don't we embed an art activity Wednesday? Let's make Thursday a call-in day. So we're not actually assigning work, but we're still available, but no work's being assigned. And I think for our flow, what was best for our kids was actually us as teachers all coordinating, all working together. And maybe it slows down our workload a little bit because I'm not necessarily trying to plan for 5 days. But it's been much better for us as a community of teachers because now we're on the same page. We have a clear plan. And then it's been good for our students because now they're also seeing that we're all working on the same page. They're seeing that I don't have to worry about my math teacher giving me 6 math while I have an English and I have a science and I have a music. We've slowed everything down, been much more, regimented and scheduled in regards to Chay's got English Monday, Pat's got math Tuesday. We rotate through on Wednesday, Thursday, sort of a call-in day, leave your message days. And I think for us, that's been the best part for our communities and families is being really coordinated and calm as the staff and as for us as a middle, working out exactly how we want to best serve our communities and ourselves.
Yeah, I think you touched several times about just being on the same page, having the regimen down. I think that really helps both the students and in your families of the fact that okay, now I know what to expect. Now I know what I'm getting, and I feel confident that my teachers are good, that they know what they're doing, and we're good. I know what to expect. And I think you separating so you're not trying to plan out 5 days, right? Yeah. Now you can focus on all those extra. You have a little bit of a little more time. Or workload to put towards answering those calls and answering those conversations and giving them the support you need, right? So yes. I think that's really good. I do want to get to a couple comments here. Melissa says, yes, totally can relate to having to force the energy while doing remote teaching. It comes, but getting started is sometimes so difficult. Becky says, yes, each week I feel like I'm losing more kids. Keeping up the engagement is a huge challenge. And then Dave agrees, says, yes, coordination is key. This is the reason Amazon has taken over the world. Ease of service and one click shopping. Doing this for kids and families is so important. So curious, going off of Becky's comment about she feels like she's losing more kids each week. How has that been as far as your retention of your kids' participation, your kids' responses, your family's responses? How has that, did it start off with most of your kids responding and engaging and then tallying off, or the other way around? How's that been for you guys?
Coming from the community that we teach in, it's been all over the place. Our students are coming in with lots of different needs. And so we had the ones that were already connected in the very beginning were very antsy and very anxious and very okay, give us work. Give us work. And then there were a large number of students that had no access. And so, getting in touch with parents and letting them know what's happening and, fill out the survey, tell us what you need. That took a little bit of time. And so, we had this balance. We had no balance, actually. We had this group of kids that were here and then a group of kids that were here. At some point they got to here and now it's like this. Yeah. So now I'm feeling like it's the kids that were really engaged in the beginning now are starting to taper off, but the ones that are getting the access are now okay, give us some more. Yeah. But as the time has passed, I think that we have really become far more intentional with our teaching. And that took a little bit of time, right? Getting all of the collaborating between all of the teachers down and figuring out what the real needs are. But now that I feel like our teaching is far more intentional. The work that we are putting out there is less in terms of the content, but I guess the quantity of the content, but the quality of the content I feel like is getting a bit better now. So I feel like keeping the kids is getting a little bit easier. because the workload is not overwhelming for them anymore. But the level of connectivity, I think that a lot of students, and now the weather is also getting nice, so a lot of kids are starting to
competition
spend more time. That's right. They're starting to spend a little bit more time outside, which is going to be something that we have to compete with now too.
Now, you feel you said initially you had like some kids that were really, really engaged, and now they're not as much. Do you feel is that because they're just not engaged, or maybe they were really worried at first, now they're just a little more relaxed because they get it, they understand that the workload's not quite as high, and they're like, I can handle this, I'm fine. Like, is it that, or are they just completely disconnected now?
I think it's a little bit of a combination.
A little bit, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit of the anxiety was kind of and it pushes us. A little bit of stress is good for us. So it was kind of pushing them a little bit to try and get connected and learn the system. And although we were using Google Classroom before, this is in a much different way now.
Yeah.
And so trying to ask the students, what do you need from us? What do you need? Do you want to do regular Google Meets, or, do you want to do something where we're all connected? And we're still getting a very varied response from our students.
I bet.
Yeah. So there's not one sort of theme that we're finding, or one sort of way that most students are leaning towards. Yeah. I feel like we're still all over the place. And I think a lot of that comes from, we didn't have a lot of direction going into this, right? So there were no real expectations.
Yeah, it was all new. Right?
It was all new.
We're still trying to figure it out, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
That's crazy. Adam says, good morning. Good morning, Adam. Always awesome to see you. I see we got a few more coming in here. Adam says, I'm at 75% attendance average at my weekly meetings. I've seen every kid at least once. Mary says, we have 2 weeks of instruction left and things are really dropping off. Yeah, they could be seeing that sort of light at the end of the tunnel, I guess, for lack of a better word. Adam says, but we can build activities that connect to the nice weather. That's a great point. Adam's trying to engage them in utilizing the nice weather, right? Challenge them to see learning can happen outdoors. I think that's a great point, Adam. Joe says, once school was canceled for the year, we've seen a drop off in participation. We only have 3 weeks left until school is out. Yeah, I think you're definitely going to see that, where we had some students who were like, I got to make sure that I keep my grades up, or I don't lose my average that I had this year. And then when they cancel school for the rest, they're like, well, and there was a conversation. Tim Cavey from Teachers on Fire was live yesterday on Instagram talking about this idea of like, if we're not graded in everything, what's motivating them? And I commented, and it was really awesome. He shared it out this morning and stuff, or last night. But my thing was like, if grades are the only thing that motivate them, then we've been doing it wrong the whole time. Like we have to try to turn kids into learners, not grade getters, is how I phrased it, right? Because this is the very reason. This is a prime example right now, because they're like, if I'm just getting a grade, then I don't really care what Pat or Che say right now, because my grade's not going to change, right? I'll worry about it next year. But if we've got them engaged and just trying to learn, and they're actually trying to, they feel that value, then this is a different story, and they're not worried about that. Now, we still, obviously, there's a lot of other challenges, but Che, so you guys mentioned the Google Meets and stuff. Are you doing a lot, Che? Are you guys doing Google Meets? Is that something you're doing weekly, or did that work or not? Or
I haven't found overwhelmed. There's no data. We haven't collected anything, so it's just instinct and it's just intuition. But I haven't found in our community it's been a great success. Okay. Now, I have anecdotal stories where I've had students that were in the classroom that are actually outperforming what they did in the building. So that's something to examine further, and that's been really good to see. But overall, I probably only have one or two sort of fully engaged, high achieving, putting in, because it's about consistency, it's about participation, it's about level of engagement, and then how often are you staying engaged at a high level? And I would anecdotally say I have very few students that are staying consistently engaged at a high level, and that is distinctly different than in the classroom. And maybe it's the hurricane energy, maybe it's the building, maybe it's the getting to see all your different teachers on Rotary, hanging out with your peers. And so in the sense of building something, you're always trying new things, because you're trying to get that engagement level back to the way you saw it in your building. So even in terms of my planning, have I been totally consistent with anything? Not really, in the sense, because I haven't caught something that I'm finding is I don't want to duplicate the classroom energy, but I want to have something where I can say, yeah, I've got most of these kids hooked. I've got most of these kids engaged. And although most of my kids are probably doing the work, and I still have the issues that Pav talked about, we have a real big extreme. So I still have 2 or 3 that have not even connected once, where I'm struggling to make communications and where families, where even emails are dropping off along with cell phones. So you have, that is your primary issue. And then again, you are all over the place because you're trying to connect with students on so many different levels. Yeah. And so Google Meets and these things we've tried, but do I feel really consistent that I have a really great remote learning plan? Oh, no, I don't. I am still engaged in crisis learning because I know from output of how students are engaged, even though they're friendly, the quality of the work is not necessarily right there. Even if I'm giving real-time feedback on a document, it's still not the same as coming over and writing on a little sticky note and putting it right beside and say, let's get on this, and then I can circulate back around. Even that sort of feedback that always generates and drives learning, even if I'm doing it remotely, it doesn't have the same impact. So I'm still learning because I feel that my kids are just not at the same level of engagement that they were. But then, like I said, I have 1 or 2 that have really surprised me that I can go back and say, you know what, these students that were struggling in school, everything was a distraction, we're down at the office every second day. All of a sudden, they have a nice, consistent environment. I'm not sure what the environment is, but they're working at a level that I hadn't seen before, which is tough because you want to have a trend that you can say definitively, this didn't work or this worked. But you don't have that definitiveness, which of course also makes it tough to plan because you don't have a trend that you can just bank on. You're getting a wide variety of student engagement, student learning, and very inconsistent, purposefully inconsistent as I try to find those hooks. I want to find those things that are going to work.
Yeah, it's tough to figure out that consistency because the environment's no longer consistent because you don't have control over that anymore. And how a kid did it in the school does and interacted necessarily in your classroom doesn't necessarily tell you enough about what the home environment's like. And you don't know whether their parents are still working or not, or working remotely or whatever that is. And there's so many things that go into their schedule, their consistency, how they're out, their focus. You no longer have that consistent environment. And we're seeing that all over, just the shift of like kids that weren't doing well now are, and we're not sure why. And the kid that was doing really well maybe isn't now, but we're not exactly sure what the environment is at home. It's a really interesting. I think I was talking yesterday, and turns out my niece who's in high school was struggling. She didn't do poorly. She was struggling. She didn't really enjoy school. She's doing awesome right now. She's killing it. She's like loving it because she should have been in this time of environment. It was just a different spot. I got a bunch of comments flying in here. Let me get to a few of them here. Where are we at? So Melissa says, I teach kinders, so it's been a challenge because parents have to connect, but I've been impressed. We aren't a one-to-one technology, but they're staying connected. Brianna's watching. Hi, Brianna. Becky says, yes, today is outside choice boards. Ooh, I like that, Becky. So she's doing nice. Outside learning there. Dave Schmidt says, we have been blown away 95% attendance and holding strong. Thursdays and Fridays are 100% teacher connection days. Kids who do not attend real-time or synchronous instruction get one-on-one phone calls. It encourages teachers to make lessons engaging, so kids will show up. If kids show up Monday through Wednesday, then Thursday, Fridays are a lot easier. We have been blessed with amazing people working really hard. That's awesome. Brandon, I see you watching. Good morning. Kristen, good morning. Megan says we're doing the same. To Joe, working on trying to find new ways to engage them. We've got just under a month left. Becky says she's changing things up every week to see what's sticking. So saying just like what you were saying there, Chase, it's hard to be consistent now because you're trying to figure out what's going on. You don't have 20 years to look back on, right? Because you haven't done this. It's different, right? It's a different thing. So Alex says, thank you for acknowledging that we have some students who haven't checked in once yet. It is a struggle for us. And so it is helpful to know we aren't alone. I think, Alex, absolutely not alone. I've talked to a ton of both teachers and admins who are in that spot. They're like, one of my biggest worries right now is I have these 3 kids or these 5 kids that I have zero connection with. I have no idea if they're even okay.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who I was talking to. I don't know if it was on one of the lives or whatever. We talked about like they've gone and tracked them down in other ways. So like they're literally like got on TikTok because they know the kids are on there. So they don't even care about engagement. They just want to make sure the kid's okay. And they're like, oh, they're posting like crazy on TikTok, so they're safe. They're healthy. Yes. That's fine. Or they're on Instagram, they're on this or whatever. So like, or reaching out to other students who are connected to them and just saying, hey, I just want to know if Johnny's okay. Like, have you talked to Stacy? Like, is she alive? Is everything good? Okay, great. If she's not engaged, like, because right now, like, that's, if you haven't heard from her, like, that's the most important piece is, are they safe? Are they healthy? Are they great? once I know that, now I can try to figure out how to engage them, but at least I know that they're okay. So Greg's watching. Good morning, Greg. Stacy says, absolutely, no matter what we do virtually, it will never be as effective as the personal and physical face-to-face interaction. I think that's the hardest part is just that, like you said, bring the energy. It's a different type of energy. It's a different type of environment. It's inconsistent. You might have a great Google Meet where you bring some serious energy and they get super engaged and pumped up, but it's only 10 of them, right? What about the other half of the class and all that stuff? So it's an really interesting mix. So you're up in Toronto. And I know we talked about coming on just before that. You said Quebec went back, right? Is that who went back? Yeah. Now, did they call it for Toronto? Are you guys in Ontario? Did they call for the rest of the year, or are you still potentially going back?
So they haven't told us that officially school is out for the rest of the year. It's right now, it's till the end of the month, May 31st. We do go right till the end of June.
So you do have another month potentially.
Yeah. Okay. So potentially, yeah. But I don't see it going back. I think it's one of those, we just ease people into the idea and just give them the 4 weeks. And we're already talking about, like, as a school, we're talking about, how are we going to do our grade 8 graduation ceremony remotely? And we're already having those discussions. We're doing all of the planning for next year, happening right now through online means. So we don't anticipate going back, but I think it's just, easing people into the idea.
Yeah. We've had quite a few states in the states that have called it for the year, but there's still a few that haven't. Which is, for us here, at this point, it's so close to the end. It's almost not. It would be such a drastic shift back that it would just, and is it worth it? I mean, when you come to some of the closure and the emotional stuff, it may be, because of especially some of the celebrations and stuff like that. But even those things are going to have to be thought out because of social distance and as it is. We've been doing an administrators mastermind, and a lot of talk around there is how are we doing these celebrations? Primarily, obviously, graduation, and it's interesting to see the things that are going on. I think I believe it was Dave. Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Schmitto, that they're working with a local drive-in theater and they're going to project it on there so everyone come in the cars and sit and watch, and they'll do the ceremony that way. So, like, just thinking out of the box, how can we make it as close to that as possible? A lot of other ones that are just doing virtual, recording all the the speeches and stuff like that, and then they're going to try and do a physical one later on to have that moment for families and stuff. So I did want to mention, I haven't said anything yet. If you're listening on the podcast right now or watching on YouTube and you want to get in on the action and be here with our guests and chatting and stuff, you need to get in the Facebook group, teachbettergroup.com, or just search Teach Better Team on Facebook. You can find us here and get in. A lot of people watching, a lot of people commenting, loving it. These lives drop-ins go up on the podcast as a bonus episode afterwards, and then also on our YouTube page, which is just at Teach Better Team as well. Speaking of the podcast, let me get to a couple. I got more comments coming in. I'm not going to get to talk. So Adam says,
Pav brings them in. Pav brings them in.
She does. People just know. Adam says, the last student I connected with broke down crying because she misses school and me so much. That's why we need to connect. Yeah, that's such a huge point. And it's so tough because you can't, like, what do you do? Like, you can't fix that necessarily. I was happy my son's teacher started doing a weekly Google Meet because just before that I don't know if I had anything to do with it, but I told her, I'm like my son told me that he misses his teacher's face. Like, he just wants to see you, like, and talk to you. Right. And then, like, when he gets on, he just lights up every time. But Lydia, good morning. Brian says, I remember Dave Burgess asking if students don't have to be there, would you be teaching to an empty room? I think we are all finding out if that's true more than ever. That's a great point, Brian. Dave says it all the time, like, about your lesson, your engagement. If students didn't have to be in your room, would you be teaching to an empty room? I think we're all seeing that firsthand right now. That's an interesting way to look at it. Mary said, this is making me feel better as a special teacher with 750 kids. Sometimes I think I'm shooting arrows in the sky. Yeah, I think everyone's there with you, Mary. Adam says, are schools where you are taking attendance? That's a good question. So up in Canada, you guys doing attendance in your school? Do you know if other schools, other districts are, or no?
We've never heard of that happening around here. No.
Gotcha.
Perhaps, at a school that's 1-to-1, we can see that as being
some sort of check-in or something.
Yeah, some sort of check-in, but there's absolutely no way we could even make that feasible over here right now.
We are taking attendance for staff meetings, though.
Well, but it's not equitable, right? Even 1-to-1, you don't know.
That's true.
What they're if they have the device doesn't mean they can access things,
right?
And
exactly.
And if they have the device and have the Wi-Fi but don't have the environment, they still can't. Like, it's so hard to know what that is. That's really tough. So
most of our families live in with cousins and uncles. We have very few families in our community that are living in sort of the traditional family, in the sense of most of our houses, or most of our apartments that our students are coming from, are definitely lots of responsibilities. When we think about equity, ultimately, we're not even thinking about tech anymore. So many of our students have so many other obligations, are taking care of so many other siblings. They are in big, bustling households. And Jeff, you talked about that one thing. They might have a device for their house, but they have 6 people that need to cycle through it. And they don't necessarily have a large space. So, for me, even as a young teacher, that was something that I came from sort of your sort of traditional upbringing and came up in a sort of traditional community. And for me as a teacher, it was really important to see a different side of things, to realize you can be embedded in communities that are still doing wonderful things and doing great work, but you see a hardship and a challenge that I didn't, as a young teacher, was just sort of oblivious to. And in these type of situations now, I don't even think tech is the unequitable issue, in the sense that we can actually do something about that. It's about spaces. It's about resources. It's about, like you said, access to time to do it. So certainly one of our big concerns is understanding that the community lives in, most of our students live in houses. They have their cousins, uncles, grandparents. They have a lot of things on their mind. Space is certainly an issue. Access to tech, the family may have tech, but they don't have the type of tech that can circulate so that each student, each child can be running 4 or 5 hours checking up. They get a small window of time, and they've got pressures of other things that they're trying to finish work in.
Yeah, that's a great point. I just want to note that Ray jumps in, and if all the things we're talking about, Ray's very first comment is hashtag Team Ray, followed by a hashtag Team Pat. She's trying to start some stuff, Jay. That's what's happening right now. Anyway, Adam says they've gone. Adam's here in Ohio. He said we've gone 5 weeks without taking attendance, and now we're trying to start taking attendance. Ooh, that's got to be interesting.
That's challenging.
Yeah, our school, our district is not doing attendance. We're fortunate to have a district that is 1-to-1, so they're able to offer devices to anyone who needed a device. And we just have the local cell companies waive their data plan restrictions. They offer lower discounts. Local Wi-Fi providers, internet providers offered free or extremely reduced and stuff like that. But it still goes to the same point, though. Even if you have the device, even if you have great Wi-Fi, what if you're living with, if you have these other responsibilities, you're living with multiple family members that all have to get on, or if you don't have support there, right? Like, there's a lot of different, or people that, don't have as much, don't care as much about it. And they say, well, because they either don't care or because they're working, right? Or they can't help. And so there's so many other things that go into it. It's really tough, in my opinion, to take attendance at that point. So that's an interesting take on that. Andrea says, sorry, comment's not popping up all the way. Our district asked for students to fill out a Google form every day for attendance, but it's just for the district's purposes. It doesn't count against the students if they don't. And I do think there's some of that. So there's a conversation we had, or argument we had, I guess, that you can take attendance and you can check in on things just to have the data.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There was someone, I can't remember the conversation I was having. I think it might have been one of these where they were a little upset that they were being forced to report what they were doing to the board. But I don't know we don't know what the reason for their board to make them report things. But one of the things too is, from a board standpoint or a district level admin standpoint, having data on exactly what your teachers are doing during this time could end up being very, very important, for data to look back on, or data to show that we were doing things, that we were doing everything we could, or to look back and say, okay, this is what we did. We have the data to support this is exactly what we did, and how did it work, or how did it not work, and how can we address that? So there's sort of this thin line of like, okay, do we take attendance? Do we force staff attendance? Do we force them to report what they're doing? And what's the reason behind it? What are we doing with that data? And what do we do? Do we what happens if they don't? Because then what is the actual reason for it, right? So
information matters because we can use it to generate decisions. We've been doing weekly check-ins, and I made a couple of check-ins one time, and I had some specific questions on it, and it wasn't so much it was just so much to get data, because if we want to generate what we can do for our communities and families, we want specific information. This isn't necessarily the same thing as attendance, but when you talk about data, there is real value in having really good information. It's the whole concept of mastery-based learning. Yep. I want to have a really solid foundation. So if I just take anecdotes or how I feel things are going and use that as the basis of how I'm going to drive forward, it's like hoping you're going to hit a home run. I want to have a little bit better planning. So even in our school, we've done check-ins, and then we've had the general check-ins. How are you doing? How can we support? Really basic questions that allow sort of a canvas for responses. But then at the end, it'll be like, are you comfortable doing 3 Google Meets this week? Are you comfortable if we were to do a catapult challenge? Do you have access to resources? And so you ask some questions so you can get data, so you can make, informed decisions. So data for attendance seems a little funny, but information is always important. You'd want to have as much reliable information as you can so that you can absolutely be very specific and intentional on what you want to do next.
Yeah, I think just to speak about the data in regards to attendance and, students being able to connect, I know that this has been a conversation in a lot of districts about going forward, introducing more e-learning. And I think that from that perspective, collecting that kind of data is probably useful to know, if we wanted to next year or going forward in the next couple of years, be able to introduce, maybe a shorter work week, a shorter school week, and be able to be online for a couple of days every week. Is that something that's possible? Is that something that's feasible? So, as much as I right now am not a huge fan of that, but, for the students, it could be something that works out better, or we're trying to establish that it doesn't work. So either way, I think that it is important to be collecting that data, and it's if it's being made useful in the future, then sure, let's collect that data and use it. But that's the important part, right? We have to be able to make some sort of decisions out of
if it's being used to punish students or punish staff, then that's not the right reason, right? Or because you don't trust your staff, that's not okay,
right?
If you're using it like you guys are saying, like to make informed decisions, absolutely, it makes sense. And I think it's important to communicate that with your staff if you're doing it. Like, hey, this is why we're doing it. Like, you're cool. We just want to know, so we have this moving forward. Ray says that they're taking attendance. Ray's in Illinois. They're taking attendance for the data. Teachers report it weekly. Stacy says, we are taking attendance as a school to keep track of family well-being. If family has not checked in during the week, we make every effort to contact them. I think that's super important too, is to watch that. Shannon is watching. Hi, Shannon. Becky's watching. Hi, Becky. I want to really quick, I want to try something here. We got a bunch of people watching. If you're watching right now, do me a favor, take a screenshot of what you're watching, share it out on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you want to go, and hashtag Teach Better or tag us, the Teach Better team. You can tag these two at Staff Podcast, right? That's the handle, right?
Yep.
And what's that?
I said ask Pav. She'll know what her handle is.
Share that out. We really appreciate it. Share it out. Let people know that this awesomeness is going on. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, you can still take a screenshot now and share out the same as well. Teachbettergroup.com is how to get into the group, or just search Teach Better Team on Facebook if you want to get in live every morning, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern time, to get in here and hang out. We got some more comments coming in. Andrea just agreeing. Yes, it shouldn't be a gotcha moment. No, it should not be. It should be, the way to go. Joe saying, I know what I've learned from this is that I can record my lessons and post them in my assignments. So students who missed class or didn't get it the first time can go back and watch. What are you saying over there?
I just Team Ray and Pav. I've never even heard of that team. I've never even heard of that.
Who is this?
That's a winning team.
How do I kick her? I got to figure out how to kick her.
We need the emoji.
Virtual kick.
So we have the shirts now. If you go to teachbetterswag.com, you can get a hashtag Team Jeff or hashtag Team Ray shirts.
We need a Team Ray and Pav shirt.
I strongly considered when I set them up making the hashtag Team Ray shirt much more expensive, and like always out of stock or something, so that no one can get it. But
it's more sought after, though.
I may or may not have been secretly sending some of our podcast guests Team Jeff shirts, so that I can win this thing. So Team Ray Pav. I think it should be Pav Ray. Just saying. Just saying. Ray.
That's clever. That's clever.
So I'm gonna pay for that later. Anyway,
divide and conquer.
What's that?
I'm already paying for it. Pav's ego is just going.
She says hashtag Team Jeff isn't and Sal. And Alex is still pushing. He wants a Team Jeff Ray. He's being very down the middle. He doesn't want to choose a side. I think he's afraid of what Ray might say because we know that Alex wants Team Jeff, but he's being careful. So speaking of Team Pav and Che, sorry, dude. Talk about we've kind of talked about it a little bit. You sort of touched on it, but I'd love for you to just sort of really can you dive into the podcast? So it's a Staff Room podcast. For anyone who hasn't listened, maybe they maybe listen to the podcast, maybe they don't. Sort of what can we expect typically from the podcast? What's the show? What's the focus on it? Like I said, you already sort of touched on, but I really like to focus on it just for a minute, and then also on your live drive show too. Just sort of what those two things are, where we can find them, and what to expect from them.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Staff Room podcast is where we originally started. It hasn't been a year yet. It's been about 9 months. And so
just a baby.
It's just a baby, I know, but we're into episode 33, and then we do little weekly shorter episodes that are more individualized. So Che will do an interlude, and I will do an interlude, that's far more reflective and far more based on our own personalities as individuals, and things that are on our minds about anything really, whiteboard markers, so. But the podcast itself, the episodes we offer, it's more commentary based. So we will, as Che always describes it, we are like sports announcers, right? We were announcing something that we're experiencing in the classroom, and we're just having our back and forth conversation about something, talking about best practices, talking about things that have worked in our classroom. So it's very anecdotal. But we feel like those sort of real life experiences that we may have experienced that particular day are very useful for not only our own reflection, but from what we've seen, a lot of teachers also are able to relate to what we're experiencing, and they offer their perspectives, and we utilize those perspectives. We include them in the podcast, and we talk about them a lot. We interact a lot with teachers from all over the world, and so that's really helped us quite a bit as well. So that's what the Staff Room podcast is based on. That's our premise. We have a segment in the podcast that's called 3 Enlightened Minutes, where we give up our show for somebody that we've met, somebody that's reached out to us. A lot of teachers will talk about initiatives or things that they're working on, or a particular aspect of their teaching that they are very proud of, or something that they want to discuss. And so that's been really cool, because we've really been able to highlight some of the really cool things that teachers are doing. And we've learned a lot, and we've made a lot of great connections through teachers that way. So that's the podcast. We put out a full-length episode, which ranges from about 30 to 40 minutes once a week, usually on Friday evenings. So you have all weekend to listen to it. And then that's it. Our interludes we put out midweek. So, and then Che, you want to talk about the drive?
That's really good, eh? Like, you nailed it down just perfect there. I don't need to add anything in. We certainly describe the show as like the NBA halftime. We are Kenny, Charles, and Shaq. And so we talk anecdotally, always on a specific topic. And then we also sometimes review articles. So we're very part of bettering our teaching practice is reading articles. And then we often will take an article and we'll do, we had this article, let's talk about this. And I think we always emphasize that we're not necessarily right. We're not necessarily wrong. We're two teachers in the moment discussing what was important to them today. And this is how we feel right here, right now. And it might pivot tomorrow. And I think that's sort of been our authenticity in that segment just resonates with people. So we have a good set of loyal followers that just like what we have to say. And our expertise is just being in the classroom. Or I removed the word just. Our expertise is being in the classroom. And it resonates. And if I go further and talk about the drive, we've been really lucky in the sense that Pav draws a lot of attention. She's got a great, wonderful personality. And, you know, I'm like the little water boy. I bring the coffee, I make the tea. And because of Pav's wonderful personality, we got invited to be on part of VoiceEd Radio, which is it's an app and it's an online radio station. And the foundation is in Canada, but it does have it branches out internationally in the United States. But you can go to the radio station on the web, or you can download its app. And Stephen Hurley, who I call the Podfather, he liked our personality. So he said, well, I got a spot for your podcast. Your podcast, so it plays on VoiceEd Radio on Tuesday mornings. But he said, let's brainstorm. Let's do something. You guys got personality. And by personality, you know, hashtag Pav has personality. We can bank on this. So I said, okay, let's start doing some brainstorming. And this is where we as a podcast pivot, because up until this point, we were just using our one mic.
Mm-hmm.
We can show you needed better equipment. You needed a soundboard that we can connect directly to the radio. We needed mics where our sound was a little bit pristine. So we had to make a choice. Are we personally ready to invest more money? Because we needed to invest money. And his selling point was, and this is no shot at podcasters because we're a podcaster, he goes, Che, Pav, anyone can have a podcast, but do you have a radio show? Oh, okay, you got us. We made some investments, and then he invested in us, and he got us, gave us some mics, and he came right down to our school, and he was showing us how to do everything, and he was giving like real live PD. This is how we get set up. This is how we do it. And so that was the foundation of we started The Drive with Che and Pav. Sorry, Pav, I put my name first. The foundation was just the personalities of Che and Pav are going to do a live drive teacher radio show. So it's based on music. It's like you listen to the radio normal on the way to work. And so it's really picked up. It's really fun. There's so much adrenaline. So the first 2 live episodes we did, you know, we had 10 or 15 or 25 people listening live, but we're far, far greater than that now. It's really booming. It's really blossoming. You have lots of people trying to say, how do I get the app? Where do I find the radio show? And so The Drive with Che and Pav is even maybe more exhilarating than the podcast, but now they work hand in hand. Doing the radio gives us that feedback, immediate connection with our audience, like, because it's in real time, similar to now. You're checking your board, you're getting that real time conversation. And so The Drive has just been this very, very informal, but really fun and a great connector and a great unifier. And it's helped us be better podcasters in terms of gear. It's helped us be better podcasters in the sense that we're getting a real live sense of what are on teachers' minds. So every Friday morning, 8 to 9 Eastern now, we're doing The Drive live with Che and Pav. And we take all the requests Thursday night. And it's a lot of fun, but also makes us, again, much better in tune with education, talking about our practice, and then getting to play a few good George Michael tunes as well.
Chase, I just want to correct something because that's what I do. It's 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern.
Oh, was I not live? What time did I say?
You said 8 to 9. It's okay. 8 to 9 Central.
Yeah, that's all right. You didn't even know, Che, but you just went Team Ray right there. Going at Central Time. She's appreciating that, I'm sure.
There you go.
So all right. So real quick, so best places to connect with you two and with the podcast and with The Drive. Where do we go?
So we are on Facebook and we are on Instagram as the Staff Room Podcast. On Twitter, we are at Staff Podcast. We are at The Drive VoiceEd. And then you can reach us individually at Pav Wander or at Mr. C. Cheney. So those are the best ways to reach us. You can always shoot us an email as well at thestaffroompodcast@gmail.com. But we're pretty much everywhere. Just Google our names.
Oh, that's big. We're everywhere. We're huge.
Everywhere. I love it. So anyone watching, anyone listening, I expect you all to go and connect with these two. Check out the podcast. Check out The Drive. The podcast, I love the podcast because it's just kind of like sitting in on a really just a conversation. It's very welcoming. It's very just kind of relaxing, but there's also a lot of energy there. But you're just kind of in on a conversation, and then The Drive is fun because obviously you get the music mix in there and stuff too. And the live element, it really is a kind of a cool piece to it too. So make sure you connect with these two. I really appreciate you both coming on. This was fun. We've been connected for a little while. We've had some really fun like phone calls and video chats and goofing around and the whole, we got the Jeff versus Ray, we got the Che versus Pav, and we got the U.S. versus Canada, right? We got the whole thing going on. We love it. So we really enjoy just engaging with both of you and getting to know you more. And hopefully one day in person it'll happen.
Yes.
So that'll be great. But really appreciate coming on, sharing your stories, sharing what's going on right now and how you guys are dealing with things and hanging out with us this morning. So appreciate y'all. Appreciate everyone who is watching live, all the comments, anyone who's listening on the podcast. Make sure you subscribe in, comment, and reviewing. Really appreciate that. Make sure you get into the group, teachbettergroup.com for that. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and a subscribe there, and then come join the group so you can get in this group. Is an awesome group, even outside of this, just all the time, very active teachers from all over the world helping each other, supporting each other. So really appreciate, hopefully you get in there. Happy Teacher Appreciation Week to everyone. I hope you know that you're appreciated far beyond this week. But I appreciate everyone watching, appreciate everyone jumping in, and have an awesome Monday and an awesome rest of your week. We'll see you tomorrow morning live here as well. And we'll see you this afternoon if you've registered for our new webinar series, Better at a Distance, starting today at 3 p.m. Eastern Time and going for the next 6 weeks. It's free to register at teachbetter.com/webinar series. So get in there. We'll see you there, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jeff. It was great to be here.